Welcome to Kingdom Now, the podcast featuring faith with an edge, as we celebrate the kingdom of God within you. I'm your host, Dr. Leanne Marino, apostle, author, and theologian, and founder of Spitfire Apostolic Ministries and all the works that go along with it. I'm excited to share this program with you as we explore the ins and outs of counterculture Christianity present as you live out the kingdom of God in your everyday life. Want to learn more? Visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. And now, our program, which features a variety of formats here just for you. Interviews, teaching and preaching proclaimed everywhere from my North Carolina studio to Sanctuary and beyond. And powerful insights here for now as we turn the world upside down everywhere we go. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, happy whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. And name a country.
Poland.
Okay, to our listeners in Poland, we say Dobry den. We hope that whatever time of day it is when you are listening, that you are having a good one. And that was a great suggestion. And we welcome you to this edition of the Kingdom Now podcast. And I'm your host, Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino, here as the Spitfire, serving as the voice of counterculture Christianity, where we feature the theme of faith with an edge. And if you would like to learn more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. It has been a very long day and we are all tired. Anyway, the world of faith often pops up where we least expect it. While people might obviously think you're going to have a word from God, you're going to have an experience from God if you read the Bible, or if you listen to spiritual music, or if you go to church. And those are all great things to do. We're not putting those down. But the truth is that if the story is everywhere, as we often say, then that means that God can reach out to us literally using anything. And so what happens when we find our faith in unexpected places? So today I'm joined by my two guests. We have ministers Nick Lewis and Charlie Reap, who are returning, and they are both leaders at Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle in Charlotte. And I'm going to let the two of them introduce themselves. So y'all, take it away.
Go ahead, Nick.
Hello.
Okay, you're here. And hello, I'm Nick, and I'm going ahead. I'm Minister Nick, pronouns they, them, worship leader for Sanctuary, as well as Minister of Music. That's my other title I keep forgetting somehow. Returning guests on the podcast. It's been a while, so glad to be back. And I run a blog. It's called nickfits.com. That's nikfits.com. And yeah, hit me up on there. There should be a link tree to my social media on there too. So yeah, fun time.
Hey, I'm Charlie. Minister of Education is, I guess, my official title. They, them pronoun user. And I also have a blog. It's called Beloved Not Broken. It is beloved-not-broken.com. Got that fancy URL there.
Oh, someone has to have a fancy URL. Okay.
That's better than like .wordpress.com.
Okay, fair. We both did trade up.
We did. We upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Well,
We're recording.
You can edit this out. It's fine.
True.
Oh no, Oh no. Nope. I'm leaving it in. Okay. So, faith in unexpected places. Who wants to go first?
I vote Chuck since they picked the topic.
Okay. I'm pretty sure you came up with the idea and wrote it down.
Oh, well.
But I will go first because I actually have something pulled up. So I mostly get, well, I guess I should go back. I am a big old geek. So I like watching movies. Let's be real. I like watching one movie, and that is the 2013 masterpiece called Pacific Rim. I like,
Wait a minute, wait a minute. What did you call it? The 2013 masterpiece?
yes.
Okay.
If you
I'm
want to
just
have,
making
if,
sure I heard you right
yeah.
so I can make fun of you later. Okay.
Oh, be my guest. Be my guest. It's fine. I also like playing video games. I say video games. I pretty much play 2 video games, Skyrim and Borderlands. And I like watching maybe a handful of TV shows. So the stuff I'm really into, I can get a lot out of theology wise, to the point where I actually on my blog or on my website have a page called Nerdy Commentaries. And so so far I've done 4 posts how basically Christianity and faith relates to pop culture. I do it mostly with Marvel, and yeah, like three of the posts I've done have been about Marvel because I was really into Marvel at one time. So I've done everything from church leaders and the quest for a sacred timeline, very similar to the first season of the Loki TV show. By the way, my posts contain a lot of spoilers, so if you are not one who enjoys being spoiled to things, maybe try an older blog post. But I've also done a post about fandom culture. So in fandom culture, there's something called canon, Canon, named after the biblical canon. And then there is a fan version of that called Fanon, Fanon, which is basically like generally accepted beliefs about something that doesn't necessarily have an origin in a book, movie, film, whatever. And I have done one about church history meeting fandom culture. So the title is If the Bible is Canon, then Church Tradition is Fanon. So all this to say that I find faith in a lot of entertainment stuff. It's mostly to do with the overall themes of something. So I've written about something about like found families. Mostly it is, I would say, current events or historical events because we're talking about church history. But I notice a lot of parallel between ideas in pop culture and spiritual themes in the Bible, if that makes sense.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. And given all the things you just said, because actually, as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, this is you.
Mhm.
And I wasn't saying that in a funny way or in a negative way or in a making fun of you way.
That's okay.
It's sincerely that this is who you are, that these are your interests, these are your representations. And so you find faith in a lot of pop culture. So using one of these specific examples, and I'm actually going to say, use the example of Pacific Rim because it is your favorite and because you get so much out of it. What is an example of something from faith that you find in Pacific Rim?
I can talk about the one post I've done that's actually published. I was working on another one that's going to explore the, I guess, more overt spiritual themes in the movie. So, side note, let me go ahead and explain the plot of Pacific Rim for those who have not seen this movie. It basically is a summer blockbuster involving giant monsters and giant robots fighting each other. That is it. That's pretty much the whole movie. But it is directed by Guillermo del Toro, so the cinematography is off the charts. The CGI holds up really well because del Toro really put a lot of thought and respect into what the animators do. And so even though this is a 10-year-old movie, like it doesn't look like it's 10 years old, if you know what I mean. So basic synopsis of Pacific Rim is that you've got these giant monsters emerging from the depths of the Pacific Ocean. They're attacking cities at random. The only thing that can stop them are the skyscraper-sized robots piloted by 2 people who have to essentially share a brain cell, which opens up a lot of implications for shenanigans and shared trauma and stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. So the entire plot of the movie is like, okay, there's going to be this one pivotal event where a whole bunch of monsters are going to come out. We have to close the entry point before that happens. And so it's basically a race against time. But I find a lot more. What I find interesting about Pacific Rim is not necessarily the action, even though that's fun. It is the character dynamics. So there's a heavy emphasis on found family in this movie, where you have all of these people from different walks of life. They're different nationalities, they speak different languages. The movie is set in Hong Kong, so already it is very far removed from America at the center, which is very refreshing to see. Side note. And all of these people have to work together to save the world. And so the blog that I have done recently, called Pacific Rim Found Families in the Early Church, I did about how the family of choice or the found family resonates, or it's present in both the movie and in the early church as described in Acts 2. And I have some nice diagrams for those who've not seen the movie. They do contain stills from the movie, so if you are the kind of person who doesn't want any spoilers, maybe skip it. But other than that, it's very informative. I explain who some of these characters are, why they're important, how they relate to others, and then I go into Acts 2. And I mentioned that the first Christian converts were from all over the Roman Empire, and they all converged onto one location for what we know as the event called Pentecost. And I basically explain how the church was the original found family. I quote from scripture. I basically talk about what made Christianity so inviting in the first century. And then I conclude by saying one Savior, one Spirit, one spiritual family. And I basically bring about the point, like, we've read Acts 2. We've seen how communally focused the church was. So what happened? And I basically said human nature happened. It's easy to draw lines in the sand over trivial issues, even ones that we think are serious. And if we're honest with ourselves, this has been happening since the day of Pentecost. But here's the thing, we're called to be different and always have been. And I don't have a cool way to end it. That's basically one of the biggest things I've gotten out of Pacific Rim, among other things, is this concept of the found family, like relating directly to the formation of the early church.
Well, you don't have to have a cool ending, because that is a cool ending.
Okay, appreciate it.
I mean, actually, well, it's kind of a cool beginning, because you're basically saying that these people had to come together, basically, kind of in a certain sense, to save the world. And we don't ever think about what happens after that.
No, we don't.
They have to start again.
Yeah. Yeah, and how a lot of, we also don't talk about the lives that early Christians left behind. So I don't know if it's in First Timothy or what, but there is a point where the Apostle Timothy is mentioned as having, is that a Greek father and a Jewish mother? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then Paul mentions in some of his letters that, I couldn't tell you which one this is, but he mentions that for the sake of the kingdom, don't leave your spouse who hasn't converted to Christianity yet. Basically stay in the circumstances required, or, if your spouse doesn't like the fact that you converted to Christianity and they divorce you, that's totally fine. Well, it wouldn't have been totally fine back then, but he's just like, you know what, just go through with the divorce. But Christians shouldn't, in this context, let me clarify, in the context that we're talking about in the early church, right after the emergence of Christianity, Paul dissuaded Christians from divorcing their pagan spouses. That was also 2,000 years ago, so there was context to that. But we don't talk about the fact that, people very well were abandoned by their spouses, were abandoned by their families and support systems when they converted to Christianity. It's just kind of, we paint this happy-go-lucky picture of the church, but we don't consider what comes after that. And Leanne, I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the appeals of being in the Pacific Rim fandom is the fan fiction. And there are tons of stories involving what happens after the end of the movie, because the movie ends on a bittersweet note. I'm not telling you what happens at the end of the movie, but then you have to think about the implications of that ending. So, like, you're celebrating for a little bit for one reason, and then you're like, oh, maybe we should think about what happens afterwards. So that's a great point that you brought up.
Nick, what would you like to jump in here with?
Okay, well, not to sound like I copy Chuck, but I also get a lot of
Go
fandom
ahead and
related.
copy Chuck.
If anything, I copied you. You're totally fine.
Okay. I get a lot of spiritual insight from pop culture. If you know me IRL or follow my blog, you know I have not stopped shutting up about One Piece for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
have
much.
not.
No, I have not. So much so that I am now doing a One Piece blog series, kind of exploring faith and spiritual topics. One of the most recent ones I did, I forget exactly what it was called, but basically talking about how different members of Luffy's crew, which, if you don't know about the plot of One Piece, you can Google it, but it's basically Stretchy Rubber Kid wants to become king of the pirates and be the freest person in the world. That's basically it. And he forcibly adopts crew members on the way. Crew members slash friends, but anyway. I mean,
Forcibly.
he kind of does. Like in the first few episodes, he looks at Zoro. He's like, "Hey, I'll free you, but only if you agree to join my crew." It's like, Luffy, that's not how you make friends, but okay.
But he
But
still made friends.
I mean, he did, but it's like blackmail is not. That's not how you start. But yeah, and how every member of the crew has a different role, and you kind of get down until, if you don't want spoilers for One Piece, kind of like tune out for the next couple minutes. When you get to Robin, she's the crew's archaeologist. And that's not really something you would think, a pirate crew would need. But she is the one who can read ancient writings, which give a clue to this 100-year period of history that has been completely blocked out from the world. And that's kind of important to figuring things out and helping Luffy achieve more of his goal. And there's a whole lot of other plot stuff in there. But so she's needed. And I related that back to, I want to say it's 1 Corinthians 12, where it talks about we are all part of the body and everyone is a member of the body of Christ,
Yeah, that's
basically.
it.
Okay, cool.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember the thing. And how how the passage kind of talks about, if it's the ear said, I'm not as beautiful as the eye, maybe I should just go. Or if, I'm paraphrasing at this point, but the toenail was like, I'm not as beautiful as hand, maybe I should just leave. And it's like, no, we still need all of you. And that's kind of how I related that back. But I've also gotten inspiration from like music, Minister of Music, that's kind of my thing. On our communal blog, which we keep forgetting to promote on this one, it's, what is it, welcome in this place.wordpress.
It's you are welcome in this place.wordpress.com. So we have one of those old blog addresses with WordPress in it.
We should trade up next year then.
We'll work
On
on
that
it.
blog, yeah, on that blog, I've done a few posts, but one of the first ones I did on there was K-pop inspired. And I'm also going to be that minister for a second and mention that one of these sermons I did earlier this year was called Jesus is the Safe Word. So,
God.
yeah, there's nothing, what is it? Nothing so secular can't be made sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how the
Yep.
phrase goes?
Yeah.
But yeah,
That was the
but with that, I
phrase.
kind of talked about spiritual liberation with it. So it's not like I was a total heathen, but yeah.
Continue.
Oh, that's all I got.
Oh, that's all I got. Okay.
Mhm.
So to kind of go off of these two, I don't really have fandoms like they do. I like music, and if anything, probably the thing that has spoken to me the most in my life historically is music. And what's happened now is they play my music at the grocery store, which I don't know how I feel about that.
Oh no.
Thank you. It's very, very traumatic. But I don't play video games. I don't watch a lot of TV. I do have shows that I have watched so many times, I can recite the dialogue from them. And
Hmm.
when I started out in ministry, the thing that was really kind of interesting was that I kind of did what you guys did in my messages, only obviously they were older things. So, one of the biggest musical influences in the 90s was grunge. And one of the things that kind of struck me when I became a seminary student, and obviously grunge was over by then, was that all these guys I went to school with were listening to Soundgarden, and they were listening to these songs that were about the apocalypse, such as Black Hole Sun or 4th of July. And there was also a lot of very socially conscious music. So, if we go back a little bit further, we had Metallica with Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and several of their songs have biblical themes if you listen close enough. And they may not be biblical themes like you want to go and sing about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse during praise and worship at your church, but they still offer a message and a counterpoint to our faith that I don't think we often think of. One of the themes that you guys both pick up on very much in your interest was found family, and how much that spoke to you in the different genres that interested you. And so, in my particular interest, was always these very strong themes that maybe we're supposed to bring community awareness, that
Hmm.
we needed to be aware of what was going on around us, and that we were often very much ignorant to it. And that theology could be something that we could hear in a song just as easily as it could be something that we hear in a pulpit. But we don't consider that because we often reject the source.
Ah.
Hmm.
And now we're all going to think about that. So, having said all this, and we just all gave three examples where faith and interests overlap, as well as faith and spirituality kind of are found in unspoken places. So, let's say somebody's listening to this and they're really interested in finding more faith in their show or recognizing it for what it is. How would you suggest people go about that?
I would say you kind of have to know a little bit about Christianity before you can pick up on themes of it elsewhere. I'm coming from a different standpoint. I was practically born and raised in the church, specifically Missionary Baptist, Black Baptist, which was kind of evangelical to the left, which I have feelings about now, but anyway. I went to private Christian school from like kindergarten to 8th grade. So I've been pretty immersed in church, and because that's kind of been so ingrained in me for years, when I watch things, I'm just kind of like, oh, this is a Jesus thing. Like one example, which keep bringing up because I want someone on here to watch it, the show Noragami. Basically, there are spirits in the show that can latch onto an individual and cause them to behave in ways that they wouldn't otherwise do so, which is more basically possession if you read it about it in the Bible. So when I see things like that, it's like, oh, hey, this is like that thing that is kind of hard to read in Shakespearean text because for whatever reason they decided King James version was appropriate for children to read and understand. But that's a whole separate topic.
Gee, don't be specific or anything, Nick.
Oh no, I'm being totally vague and broad for the sake of, anonymity and all that.
But yes, continue.
But yeah, that's pretty much what I would say.
Mhm.
Or even if you find an idea that you like and kind of want to explore, you can see if, I guess, kind of the reverse, see if the Bible has anything to say about that, or if any like Christian commentators or ministers or what have said anything about that, to see if you can make a connection that way.
Hmm. If I might jump in here with another question, because I think that this would be an interesting thought process for both of you, because, and for our listeners as well, because you guys not just see this in your media, you see it in yourselves. And so, how did finding faith in these things help you to identify more of who you are called to be?
Hmm. I guess my answer to your question would be exploring all of my interests helped me be more authentic and therefore helped me to understand my place in the grand scheme of things. So I'll give an example. So back in 2011, 2012, the height of Tumblr culture, back when the internet, or at least that corner of the internet, was obsessed with Supernatural, Doctor Who, and BBC Sherlock, which were all three shows that just captivated the internet for whatever reason. I was writing fan fiction at the time. This was my first foray into fan fiction. But maybe like within a year of being entrenched in fandom culture, I felt the need to give it up. I was still very, very evangelical. I was in college, I was exploring my faith for the first time. And so I had all of the influences of my evangelical upbringing with, I guess, my own personal convictions, whether or not they were actually biblical at the time, kind of supporting this decision that, oh, what I'm doing is idolatry because I have more fun engaging in fandom culture than I do going to church, singing songs, listening to a sermon. And so I was like, I need to give this up because in my mind it was idolatry. I couldn't enjoy anything more than church. And so I took a break from fandom for several years. I think I ended up deleting my fan fiction account as well. And for the next few years, I just kind of focused on what I thought a good Christian should do. And it wasn't until very recently that I was like, you know what? Forget about this. I am really interested in fandom stuff again. Like, Doctor Who has had a resurgence. I think a new season of BBC Sherlock dropped, which isn't very exciting because we have 2-year hiatuses between seasons. But I started getting more back into fandom culture as I started deconstructing my faith. So I started deconstructing during the pandemic, I think, as a lot of us did, when we were isolated from our church communities and we were really thinking critically about our faith for the first time. So I was exploring fandom culture again, and I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is really, really cool. And I kind of kept it separate from my spiritual life, or at least so I thought. But it wasn't until soon after coming to Sanctuary where I met, other people who were just as weird as me, just as into fandom culture, just as into whatever their hyperfixations were, and they leaned into it and they were able to embrace not only their interests but also the spirituality that they found within those interests. And I was like, I wonder what that's going to look like in my life. And so I just kind of let it happen. And I was like, oh, surprisingly, God can teach me a lot through my interests. And Nick, what was the sermon that you did where you talked about how God can use our interest? I believe it was the one you cosplayed for. Is that correct?
I think so. I do not remember what it was called because it's one of the first ones I did.
All right, let me see. I'm going to pull up our, by the way, Sanctuary has a YouTube channel where we put on all of the sermons, where we put Sunday school lessons, where we put special events. Let's see. Nick, I'm trying to find yours. It was really
yeah.
good.
I
I just
remember
can't
when you
remember what
did
the
that.
thumbnail looks like.
Yeah, because I had to ask you, was like, hey, is it okay if I cosplay for charity? And you were like,
Well,
what?
and what Well, and I had to think about it, but remember what my answer was, we cosplay as biblical people.
True, yeah.
So why not? Or as reformers, or I went to some church once for Christmas, har har, and they had a testimony of the fake midwife at the birth of Christ. So I said, if everybody can do all that,
Yeah, and
anyway.
it related because the character I cosplayed as was basically an otaku. Is from the anime Ultimate Otaku Teacher, and he basically wound up teaching a class and using like video games and manga and all that stuff to relate to the students.
Oh, I found it on YouTube. Your sermon is called It's Your Calling, but on YouTube, the video is from 2 years ago. It's called What Ultimate Otaku Teacher Can Teach Us About Our Divine Calling.
Oh, that's on the nose. Cool.
I mean, I love that, but we weren't going to remember that. Okay.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, I was only half joking when I was teasing Nick earlier in this episode. For me, copying them as far as writing about pop culture, they were the ones who really introduced me to the idea that, yeah, you don't have to keep these things separate. And, as you sort of progress in your faith, like God is going to find a way to speak to you through those things. So there's really, there's no escaping your calling. There's no escaping God, but like in a good way, not like in this really ominous, like, oh, God's going to come after you way. Yeah, it's been very interesting to really embrace my fandom side because I've really missed being in fandom. I've missed interacting with a whole bunch of fans. I've missed having a blog on Tumblr and all this other stuff. But it's also helped me come to terms with my faith in a new way that I don't think I would have discovered had I not embraced my interest. I think it's allowed me to take my faith less seriously. So I take everything seriously, especially when it comes to faith. I'm very serious. I'm very concerned about doing the right thing all the time, to the point where I'm trying to achieve like some moral perfectionism, which A, isn't really possible, and B, isn't biblical. Yeah, I heard that sigh, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's teaching me to take my like certain matters of faith less seriously, and more so, you're really gonna hate this, Nick, but more so to embrace my humanity. Tell us how you really feel.
Oh my God, Nick.
You said 2 swear words. This is a family-friendly podcast. I say, as I mentioned the
Are
sermon called
we?
Jesus is the Safe Word earlier.
I was just going to say, are we a family friendly podcast?
We're friendly for some families.
13 and up.
Yeah.
Found families. We're friendly for found families.
I mean, yeah, why not?
Anyway, let's segue into anything but this. That's an interesting way to kind of put it. So, in other words, you were trying to be, at the time, Sister Super Christian, and you just gave everything up. But, Nick, is there something you'd like to share with the group?
No, it's just that was very much Chuck when I met them, but like remembering how they were compared to they are now, it's just like, oh, hon, just you wait.
I basically went feral. I've turned feral in
Yeah.
the 5 years you've known me.
Yeah. I've turned something in the 5 years you've known me, so
I don't know what I've turned. Anyway, into an old person. Anyway, so okay, look, Nick, they're playing my songs at the grocery store.
that doesn't necessarily mean they're old.
Yes, it does. Anyway,
I mean, they'll probably play
So
Call Me Maybe at the grocery store. Like, that's not old.
you go with that, Nick. Okay.
They play Miley Cyrus in the grocery store, like her Plastic Hearts album. That's not old. You're not old.
Anyway, what would you say to this about kind of through your fandom, which is that was the point I was trying to make before we segued into things. That Chuck, you were trying really, really hard to like produce something. But when you embraced your fandoms, you found that God really spoke to you through them. And that you found another level of your faith that you weren't finding when the only thing you wanted to do was go to church. So, Nick, how would you find basically through these different things and through these interests that God kind of speaks to you?
How do I find they speak to me?
Yeah.
Loudly. And I say that because, and I feel like I've jokingly vented this frustration to both of you at some point, but sometimes I will just want to, have smooth brain, not think about anything, and just watch some anime or some YouTube to decompress after like a long day at work or a hard week or something. And I'm just watching something for enjoyment. And then it's like, oh, this would make a good blog post. And I'm like, I just wanted to relax. Why? I wasn't looking for this. So it's kind of like it's kind of like divine inspiration just hits me and finds me. But I think, okay, this is a whole thought I'm having as I'm talking, so this is news for everyone. I think that's kind of proof that you're on the right track in a sense, that if you're open to hear from God anytime, anywhere, through anything, then God can say a lot to you. And I feel like the problem that we encounter sometimes is, I guess, the more conservative or fundamentalist Christians will be like, oh, you can't listen to secular music, it'll distract you from God. You can't play violent video games, it'll give you violent thoughts or whatever. Or whatever else, like, don't listen to metal, it's of the devil or whatever. And there are actually a lot of spiritual insights that you can have from different video games, different types of music, from not just American culture, but from other countries as well. And yeah, it's really, hmm, I think it's still confining God to a box as to what avenues and what people they can use to speak from and through. And I think that's where we get in the way of our faith formation and development sometimes. Because if we
Hmm.
say, oh, God can't speak through those things, and we shut that door, that might be the door that God is like timidly knocking, just going like, hello, I'm here. If you would just open up, you would see me.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't plan on saying
So
any of that. It just hit
basically,
me.
faith, the purpose of faith formation, as you were talking, kind of hit me. We're supposed to be forming faith. We're supposed to be finding faith in a lot of ways in our lives, like not just at church and not just in Christian music, but we're supposed to be forming our faith in our lives. And so we should be finding our faith formation in a lot of different ways. So when we just cut all that off, we're missing God.
Wow.
Yeah, true. And I remembered as I was typing a book I read for a class we took. Well, I took, you taught, Mom, for Apostolic University. Shout out to that seminary, called Faith Formation. And the supplemental text that I chose was written by Brother Lawrence, which was like he was a monk during the medieval period. And there's a book compiled of like some of his letters and inspirations called The Practice of the Presence of God. And in it, he kind of talks about how he finds God in the everyday, like even while he's doing kitchen work. And if he, granted, he is a little extreme Like, I think at one point he talks about, like, oh, you don't even have to finish all your meals. You can just keep communing with God. It's like, okay, buddy, slow down. But he would say, like, if his mind wanders to something else, then he just kind of redirects it back to God. And, no harm, no foul. But he really took fulfillment and enjoyment in just thinking about God no matter what he was doing. And, God is not a being that can just be restricted to church. Like, God's not an idol. We don't just go there, spend time with God, and then leave. If we believe God is everywhere, then God is everywhere, even when we're like doing laundry or something.
So, do you mean to suggest that we can find God just as much in doing laundry as we can during a sermon?
Yeah, sometimes, if not more so, depending on the church you're going to.
And if that's the case, can we also not experience God during anime or during Pacific Rim or during fan fiction as you write some sort of story about something? Okay, I don't write fan fiction, so I'm kind of improvising with what it is. I've read some of their fan fiction, but I don't write it myself, so I haven't like read people's fan fiction. But who's to say you can't find something in fan fiction or that God can't speak to you in all these different ways?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what all this has helped me to see is that basically it's okay to be different. It's okay if you're not. Okay, this is not meant to be a call out or a diss or anything. This is just me distinguishing myself from other people, and I'm prefacing this for a reason. It's okay if you don't, want to stay in the Bible for hours and just absorb everything off the pages. It's okay if you read your Bible and then, go watch your favorite TV show and then do like a blog series on that because you get more inspiration from the TV show than you do reading the Bible alone.
You mean Bible study is supposed to be an individual thing?
And it's supposed to be enjoyable? You
What?
gasp!
No. Say it ain't so.
I know.
I don't like
Novel
you
idea,
right
really.
now.
Yeah,
I
see,
don't
that's
like
how I
you right
prefaced it. It was
Okay,
just
and
like,
listen, but now we're talking about different people. Okay, before we came on, I have to preface this. Before we came on and started this conversation, Chuck asked me something for their blog, and
Yes.
they
mhm.
asked me about how Pentecostalism got started. And I gave a clearer answer, apparently, than Wikipedia.
Yes, you did.
And then I was accused of hyperfixating, and I said, I do not hyperfixate on this. And Nick said, look, you remember all this stuff from memory, and you are more knowledgeable about it than Wikipedia that has a bunch of people in it. And then I went, fine.
Didn't you also
But
write a religious encyclopedia recently?
Yes, you
I
did.
did I have to go through the editing on it, and then we're going to release it next year, but yes, I did.
Congratulations. This just
And I
proves
did
Mhm.
Nick's
it by
point as well.
myself. It's like 700 pages, and I did it by myself, and shut up, Nick. But
Mm. Yeah, you're not
the
disproving my
point
argument here.
the point, though, that you were making, and so I'm okay with validating this part of your argument, is that it's fine that I am really into it and I like doing it for hours, and it's fine that Nick doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe I want to do it and then it leads me to something else, which leads me to something else. And I'm perfectly fine and engaged with that. And it's perfectly fine that Nick leaves it and goes watches some anime and then goes in the kitchen and God drops a word.
Now, do you
There's
know it
nothing
happens
wrong with
too?
either method. Right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either method. There isn't one that's better than the other. And I think that what would be wrong is if I was trying to make Nick more like me.
Hmm.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
Well, gee, thanks.
No, I mean, I know myself. I would
No,
get
no,
bored
right.
pretty quickly.
Yeah, whatever.
Like, it's not
But
that the information's not fascinating or anything. It's just my brain's not wired to focus
right.
on that for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the first time I taught world religion, we did the entire thing in a month. And now, if you read the book, that's not feasible. But I forgot not
Mm-mm.
everybody's as interested in this as I am. And so now that we do it, we break it up quite a bit more and we take a lot more time with it because other people need a chance to absorb things at a different rate. And it's not that I'm better than everybody else or they're better than me. It's just different. And I think our interests and the place where we find God unexpectedly is very much that point. That's our differences coming out. And if, God can have different facets and we're all in the image of God and we're all different, then it only makes sense that there has to be different ways he reaches out to us.
Now, there's an angle of that we don't talk about at all.
No, we don't.
God being multifaceted,
No.
and so therefore we have different modes of learning and creation and things like that.
Mhm.
But we're so busy trying to put God in a box, we put ourselves in boxes too and label the boxes as correct and everything out of the box as trash.
It's like the search for conformity is going way too narrow.
Yeah, or they probably won't even call it conformity. They'll try and pass it off as unity.
Yep. Unity is not conformity.
Nope, it is not.
Unity values diversity.
Mhm.
Because it is possible to be diverse and unified at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Shocker.
Right. Well, like, a choir doesn't sing only one part,
Right.
but they're still unified. And they don't all sing the same notes, but they're still unified.
And sometimes not even the same words or the same lines at the same time. Like
Right.
I've sang pieces in like the alto section that were completely different from what the sopranos and soprano twos were singing, sometimes even more different than the alto ones. Sometimes we weren't even singing words, it was just notes or vowels or something
Mhm.
like that. And then we would
Right.
sing something like maybe we'd get the melody and they get a harmony, but we were singing the same thing just at different times. So
Right. Exactly. So we have one God, and that always confuses people. But if you really think about it, one God is enough with the diversity that we have.
Yeah.
true.
It's like a D20, like a 20-sided die. It's like technically it's one
Okay.
thing, but there's 20 different facets of it.
Yeah.
Okay, you
Yeah.
need to tell everybody where that's from.
Okay. So, for those who are not familiar with the world of D&D, a D20 or a 20-sided dice is so basically in the world of D&D, you have a bunch of different dice, but the one that you use the most often is called the D20, which basically allows you to roll for different actions. It basically, the lower the number, the less successful you are at doing that action. The higher the number, with the highest number being a 20, is the most success that you can have. And so if you've ever seen a D20, or if you even go to Google and look up a D20, this thing looks really cool. There are also lots of really cool designs on Etsy, all from resin makers to 3D printers. And so you cannot see all the sides at once. You can see maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see maybe 8 sides of a D20 at once. There's one that'll face towards you, so you get the clearest picture of that. And then the ones next to it are slightly at an angle, so you sort of see it, but then you don't get the full perspective of it. So your perspective of the number might be a little bit slanted, and then they continue to get slanted until you cannot see the back of the die anymore. It's the same way with God. So we might focus individually on one aspect of God, and we'd be able to see that aspect super duper clearly. Like maybe we understand the concept of God being a loving father, but some of our other perspectives of God, like God being just and God being a scorned lover sometimes, as you would read in the books of the prophets. Like, maybe we don't understand those facets because we see them at an angle. We don't see them clearly. But depending on the person who's seeing this die, they might have a different perspective than you. They might be able to see those aspects of God clearly, but not be able to see the aspects of God that you see clearly as clearly. That was a lot of phrases in there. But basically, God is like a 20-sided die, and we're able to see some facets of it really clearly, and others we cannot. So we have to rely on other people's perspectives to see the full picture.
I want you to know that I just rolled a 5 on Google.
Not a crit fail, which is great, but not great either.
Not good. Could
Not
be
good.
better. But yes, my perspection of the D20 right now is 5. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, in keeping with all of these different ideas and keeping with everything that we've kind of been talking about through this thing, when we recognize different facets of God and that there really is room for all of us, and that God really does have something for all of us, how do we encourage people to attain that, especially if they're afraid to because of their background?
I would say start small. If writing is your thing, maybe try writing a paragraph of something. You don't have to publish it anywhere. You can keep it in a journal. You could, heck, even throw it away if you're that uncomfortable with it. But just do something to start exploring it. If you maybe grew up with, you can't really listen to secular music, or if you were like how I grew up, nothing outside of gospel and Motown, then try listening to a pop song or a K-pop song or something else, or even just like watching a TV show, because sometimes they have theme songs that are either in a different language depending on what you watch, or just something modern pop or rock or what have you. Yeah, don't try to dive headfirst completely, because that can be overwhelming, but take things at your own pace, find what works for you, and just kind of start exploring from there.
Yeah, I'd say piggybacking off of what Nick said, moderation is probably the key in whatever strategy you decide to do, whether that's playing a game from your childhood with a new perspective, or I don't know, maybe even watching a movie with a friend that your friend's been begging you to see and you haven't been sure about. Yeah, we want to avoid extremes if at all possible. So we don't want to jump off the deep end and be like, okay, I'm completely forsaking every tradition that I've ever known, and I'm going to embrace all the stuff that I've been avoiding because, I want to experience all this stuff. And like, that's not good. But then you also don't want to be like, I want to completely refrain from anything that interests me that isn't related to God somehow, because that can also stifle you. So yeah, I guess echoing what Nick said, start small and maybe explore stuff in a way that is safe. So if you've always if you want to see a certain movie, maybe don't go see it in the theater, maybe stream it online in the comfort of home, or maybe watch a show with a trusted friend, somebody who will support you, who is going to support you through exploring all of your different interests. Yeah, and overall, I'm going to echo the advice that Leanne and Nick usually give me and that we dish out in return, is to not take life so seriously. Just kind of, what's the specific phrasing you use for me? To calm, it's calm down and stuff like that.
Chill.
Yeah, to just chill.
I was trying to think of something I've said. I guess chill. Okay.
There's an expletive in there somewhere, but it basically just chill.
Chill.
Just chill is the PG version.
Okay.
I love how like you were so wound up that calm down, or that calm down was the only thing you could think of. Like chill didn't even register your mind.
No.
Like your mind was so unchill you couldn't even think of chill.
I
Greatly
have
enjoying that.
generalized anxiety. I've never been chill a day in my life.
Okay, that is fair. But I like
Yeah.
you mentioned moderation
Mm-hmm.
We love
because I
moderation.
think that's, I actually said this on Sunday that our ultimate goal in Bible things should be moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we very often both recommend and fall in extremes. We
Mm-hmm.
go from one extreme to the other. We think that we have to give everything up or have everything. And so I think that a recommendation of finding a balancing act, finding really what works for you, finding where you find God, and not getting so caught up in one extreme or the other that we lose sight of why we're doing it is also really, really important. So we're about at the end of our episode of Fandom Incorporated, which
That's
hey, that
basically
would
what it
be a
turned
great
into.
thing. That would be a great title for the episode. And as a final thought, what would you both like to leave our listeners with?
Kind of piggybacking off what you just said, Mom. I would say that as a Christian, we have a personal relationship with God. And I've said this before somewhere else on a blog or a sermon or something. But basically, no, I've said a lot of things in a lot of different ways and lots of places. It's hard to keep track. But when you have a relationship with a specific individual, it's not going to look the same as someone else's relationship with that specific individual. Like me, Chuck, and Leanne all have a relationship with each other, but me and Chuck relate in a way that me and Leanne don't, and vice versa, and all that stuff. So, what works for one dynamic might not work for another. And I would say that applies with God too. You don't have to look at what majority of Christians are doing today and feel like that's your only option. If fandom culture is the way you relate to God, then go ahead and embrace that. Again, slowly and in moderation. And if, something else that we haven't touched on brings you closer to God, then do the same thing with that too. At the end of the day, you're accountable for what you do and you're responsible for how you cultivate your relationship with God.
Chuck?
Wow, Nick, you had a really good one.
This is not a competition.
I guess I want to share the example that's been playing in my mind, like while we've been talking throughout this episode. In the way that I was relating to my old self, like how I was just completely I would say I was like a one-dimensional character when I wasn't interested in anything, or I was only interested in church. I would say that we want to avoid being NPCs. For those who don't play video games, an NPC is a non-playable character, basically a background character, who only exists to interact with the hero or with the person playing the video game in some way. So their entire personality is revolving around the one thing that they're doing. Like, I play a lot of Skyrim, so the NPCs are often farmers or soldiers. The soldiers in particular, the guards of each like fort, basically exist to stop the hero if they've been caught stealing something, or give witty liners like, I used to be an adventurer like you till I took an arrow to the knee. Yeah, so they don't have a personality outside of whatever they're doing, and they're one dimensional as a result. But we want to be the, how do I say it without without telling us to embrace individuality? Okay. It should be our goal to be the protagonist in the sense that we have motivations and interests outside of the overall story, so that we're able to complete side quests, for instance. Like, giving myself as an example, my side quest is being interested in fandom culture. Like, I'm super into Pacific Rim. That's one of my side quests. And that's what I pursue when I'm not embracing my calling or the main storyline of being part of God's kingdom. And so we want to be the protagonist in that sense, not because the world revolves around us, because it certainly does not, but because we are more three-dimensional characters. We do not want to make church and spiritual things our whole personality for just to, I don't know, make it look like we're trying to fit in. Like, we need to really just kind of do our own thing. That's all I got.
But that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thank you both for being on here today, and I think that in kind of an interesting way and through our interests, we have really given a lot for people to think about, and hopefully to help people to find their balancing act in their lives between what interests them and their faith, and kind of seeing the two as connected instead of so isolated. So, how can everybody get in contact with each one of you if they so desire?
I'll go first again. You can reach me at nickfits.com. That's nikfits.com. You can send me a message on there. Or if you want to hit me up on my Twitter, that's nickfits2. That's nickfits with the number 2 after it. I'm also on TikTok at nickfits411. Nickfits with the numbers 411 after it. And yeah, basically just anywhere, just about. So
Okay. Like I mentioned, you can get in touch with me, Charlie. If you want to send me a message, I recommend going to my Tumblr. That would be at beloved-not-broken.tumblr.com. I have a inbox on there where you can send me a message anonymously or not. And I don't think you have to be a Tumblr user to do so. Don't take my word for it, because I've had Tumblr for 5 ever. You can also follow me on TikTok. I'm at beloved, period, not period broken. And for all the other things, I just recommend checking out my website. There's a lot of resources on here about queer theology, but more specifically, the nerdy commentaries I was mentioning. My website is beloved-not-broken.com.
Very good. Well, I thank both of you for being on here and for sharing about the things that you love and that interest you. And we'll definitely have you back again, but you already know that. So, we don't even have to go over that. And I thank all of you for listening. And if you would like a resource that can help you a little bit with different interests of your spiritual life, I recommend my book, Fruit of the Vine, Study and Commentary on the Fruit of the Spirit. That's Fruit of the Vine, Study and Commentary on the Fruit of the Spirit. Look me up, Dr. Leanne B. Marino, on Amazon and wherever books are sold. And all my titles will come up. There's 35 in total. So there's definitely something for everyone. And as you can gather from this episode, we're going to actually be adding to them soon. So go out there, get something that you like, share it with someone. There is both paperback and ebook available, and there will be hardcover next year. So be sure to stay tuned. Once again, look me up, Dr. Leanne B. Marino, and see what comes up. Also, check out my Pathos column at pathos.com/blogs/leadership on fire. That's pathos.com/blogs/leadership on fire for a variety of different topics that are of interest to leaders, as well as people who are interested in things that relate to leadership. So definitely check out my blog there at Leadership on Fire. Also, look me up at Kingdom Power Now across social media. I would love to have a conversation with you. We would love to see what is on your mind, as well as to hear feedback and have that conversation. So look me up across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and beyond at Kingdom Power Now. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. That's kingdompowernow.org. And if you are interested in, as was mentioned today, Apostolic University Seminary, which is completely affordable, can be done from home, and you actually will use everything that you learn, check out apostolicuniversity.org. That's apostolicuniversity.org. And if you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and we haven't scared you too much, and you are definitely interested to find your found family, because as we know from Lilo and Stitch, that family means no one gets left behind, feel free to check out Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle, better known as Sanctuary because the full name is long, at welcomeinThisPlace.org. That's welcomeinThisPlace.org. And if you have any questions that are not answered on the website, feel free to reach out. We will be happy to get back to you. And this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you in closing that our interests are God given. They are part of our makeup as people. So definitely dive into your interests so that you can find more of God waiting there for you. Until next time, be blessed. Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Now. I pray it proves to be a blessing in your life. To learn more about this work, ask a question, submit feedback or a topic suggestion, advertise on air, or donate to this work, visit my website, which contains essential information and links for other points of contact around the web at kingdompowernow.org. Also, if you are in our area and would like to visit Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle SIFT, visit welcomeinThisPlace.org. Until next time, this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you that the kingdom of God is within you, and that means the kingdom is now.